only 40 years young, our sport of triathlon hasn't been around for very long at all. But in that short spell of time, there sure have been a significant change in what we see athletes wearing out there on the racecourse. So in today's video, I thought it'd be a little bit of fun to take a trip down through the years and have a look at the retro kits of yesteryear and compare how they differ from what we see our favourite pros wearing just now. And to help with that, I've reached out to a few familiar faces to see what they might have lying around at home. Okay then, let's get started with the early pioneering years of our sport and the early 1980s. Now triathlon was just finding its feet at this time, and there was no set uniform or go-to race kits as such that the athletes would wear. In fact, you go through the archives and it tends to be a hybrid mix of race kits that you find. You might often be forgiven for thinking that triathletes were either runners or cyclists. You might see them wearing baggy running vests coupled with maybe a pair of shorts more familiar to a bike race, or indeed one of those coupled with, say, a set of Speedos or swimming trunks. It is a hazy time for our sport, but one person who I thought might actually have a real good insight into the history of this period was Triathlon Hall of Fame member and all-round industry legend Bob Babbitt. Now he himself did actually race one of those very early Ironman Hawaiis in 1980. And here's Bob with a fascinating story about one race kit from those early years.
Oh, hey everybody. Professor Bob here. This is your tri-history lesson today. Team J. David is the subject. I was just looking through this book that I had from 1983. A lot of you out there probably never heard of Team J. David. Well, Team J. David started in 1982, 1983. And it was started by J. David Dominelli, who was this big-time investor here at San Diego, guaranteeing 40 and 50% return on your money. And he signed Mark Allen, Scott Molina, Scott Tinley, Jeff Tinley, John Howard, Kathleen McCartney, Julie Leach. All the best athletes really in the world were wearing the J. David skin suit. Here's a little tour of the J. David skin suit. You've got the J. David logo up top. You got the J. David logo on both legs. At that point, a lot of guys were wearing two-piece outfits on the bike. J. David brought in the one-piece suit. And if you notice the rainbow look on the front of the jersey, they did have world champions on the team. Kathleen McCartney was a world champion in Kona, as was Julie Leach and Scott Tinley, and John Howard.
Now, despite the arrival of this tri-suit, which to be fair had sleeves and was probably years ahead of its time, we really didn't see athletes deviating much from the traditional Speedos and short singlet coupling for, well, pretty much the next decade or so. In fact, some of the very best athletes of the time demonstrate that for us now, with the likes of Scott Molina. Well, he's wearing a baggy running vest and some long cycling shorts. Then you've got Dave Scott, who dominated Ironman Hawaii throughout the 80s. He is wearing some Speedos and again a simple small singlet of sorts. Greg Welch, he's wearing pretty much the same. And we can see him here running alongside the great Mark Allen, who interestingly, he is wearing some baggy running shorts and a light running vest, which he's obviously changed into for that marathon, which was often commonplace years ago for an Ironman event. And then during this period of the mid-80s through the 90s, the women equally were steering clear of any sort of full sleeves options or long suits. No, for them, they were usually opting for one of two options, and Erin Baker and Paula Newby-Fraser, who dominated Ironman Hawaii during this decade, they usually opted for either a small two-piece, a bit like what the men were wearing, or perhaps a simple swimming costume. And the simplicity of these designs was actually often contrasted by some bright, wacky colours. Okay then, moving from the mid-90s into the early 2000s now, and this Speedo singlet combo was still extremely popular as a choice amongst athletes, but we were starting to see some new trends appearing. And one of those was wearing a tri-suit on the bike and then removing that in T2 to then run in that Speedo singlet combo. And to talk about this, amongst other things, is multiple record-winning Ironman New Zealand champion Cameron Brown, and he's going to take us through an evolution of a variety of kits from the early years in his career.
Hey guys, so I first started in the sport in 1987, a long time ago. In that time, all we used to wear is the old Speedos and just Speedo pants and pretty much just singlets on the bike. You'd wear nothing, you'd just have Speedos on as bottoms, and that would be it. And then you'd put your singlet on. Sometimes you'd just race in a Speedo for the run as well. So this goes back to 1995 at the World Champs in Sweden. Ended up getting 5th at the World Championships, long course there. Then I did my first Ironman in 1997, and it's just sort of starting to move into sort of tri-suits. So I wore this on the bike, and then I changed into just a Speedos again and just a singlet. And then again, this is 1999 when the race shifted to Taupo, and again a bit of a tri-suit on the bike, and then again changed into a Speedo and singlet. And then from 2001, again, all I was sort of wearing was these tiny little singlets. So that, again, if it was a hot race, you'd just swim in Speedos. There was no neoprene type speed suits in the swim, so you'd just swim in Speedos, and that was it. And then chuck this on for the bike ride and the run.
Well, from one legend talking about his race kits to another one. Now, when I was a junior, picking up magazines, the front cover was often adored by Simon Lessing, and he dominated the ITU scene through the late 1990s. And I can't really forget those classic Nike tops that he was racing in. Well, luckily for me, and hopefully you guys share my enthusiasm, here is Simon talking about one of those classic race tops and going into detail as to how it was designed and why he wore that for the majority of his short course career.
Initially, when I was sponsored by Nike, they created their own triathlon apparel. And then after a while, they decided it just wasn't viable. There weren't enough people doing the sport. So they dropped triathlon apparel completely. So this garment here was custom made. So I would go to Hilversum in the Netherlands, and once a year they would measure me up, ask me what I wanted. And then a couple of months later, they would come out with essentially race gear. So this here has a zipper down the front, and the reason for that is I always like to race in a Speedo. I tried racing in trunks, or what we would call tri shorts right now, and I just felt them really constrictive. So non-wetsuit races, I actually used to tuck this down into my Speedo, and then exiting the water with the zipper allowed me to kind of pull it over my shoulders. So that worked pretty well. Minimalist for sure, and great for short distance racing. Obviously, probably not a great piece of apparel for long distance racing.
Okay, so we've had Cameron Brown touching on the early use of tri-suits in long course racing, but another triathlon superstar has a story about why a certain race suit, an important one, just wasn't going to work for him in short course racing. Yes, here is Tim Don comically explaining why the race suit that he was issued at the first of his 3 Olympic Games experiences in Sydney 2000 just wasn't going to work for him or the high expectations that he and his teammates had for race day.
Hey everyone at GTN, I wanted to show you my Sydney 2000, so 20-year-old race kit from the Olympic Games. Great Britain was sponsored by Adidas, and they decided to make their first ever triathlon suit. It's a bit different to the long distance suits we ride today with all the technical aspects of them that make you go super fast, and even the ITU suits. So this is the kit they wanted me to race in. Size small, looks quite large. As you can see across the back, very wide, very short leg. When Simon Lessing and Andrew Johns, who are the 2 other guys in the British team, we tried it, it is literally just lycra with no coating. It was going to be a wetsuit swim, but it literally doubled in weight when it filled with water. The back had this mesh, but it's very much a Linford Christie style, not much back, got a bit of name, and they did a chamois which goes halfway up your bum, which you don't particularly sit on. If I turn it inside out, hasn't been worn, do not panic. The chamois was extra material, but I don't know if you can see, there are seams everywhere and right up your bum. So in the end, we had a meeting, and when things are Olympic Games, it gets very, very political very quickly, but we all refused actually to race this. So we ended up racing in a pair of normal swimming trunks, and they got a top like this, which they cut in half and sewed up. Because it was a wetsuit swim, we actually ended up racing in a 2-piece. Yeah, so here you have it, Sydney Olympic Game triathlon kit. It's come a long way since then.
I guess it was a sign of the changing nature of the sport that more commercial opportunities were starting to become available to athletes, and the design of kits was starting to reflect this with altering and logo placements. And This is something that allows me to talk about one final team structure example, and that was where all of the athletes were racing in the same kit design, or I suppose a uniform as such. And one such team was the iconically branded Commerzbank squad. Now, Scott Nedley was somebody who was part of that team in its formation, so I reached out to him to ask him to talk through a memorable race where he actually set the Scottish Ironman record at the time.
Hi, my name's Scott Nedley, and I was part of the Commerzbank team back in 2009, and this was the kit that we transitioned to that year. The team was originally the Dresdner Kleinwerk team. With the markets crash that happened earlier that year, Dresdner Bank was acquired by Commerzbank, and this was the kit that we had transitioned to come Ironman Hawaii at the World Ironman Championships.
Now they do say if you keep a hold of clothes long enough, they will come back into fashion. So I thought it was brilliant to be reminded of Simon and Cam pulling up their tri-tops as they got out of the water, just as you might see right now at Hawaii with athletes pulling their cutting edge design sleeve suits up as well. Who knows where the design of race kits will go in the next decade, but I'm looking forward to finding out. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, so please hit that thumb up like button and don't forget to follow us on our social media channels.